These are my top death metal albums. Keep in mind, these are simply my favorites. I'm not arguing that these are the most important, the most influential, or anything like that. These are just my favorites, and they're in no particular order. Cryptopsy, None So Vile. This is death metal for the death metal fan. I heard Blaine Smith of Banger TV describe it as the caviar of death metal, and I think that's completely accurate. This is extreme. This is not going to be your first death metal album. Everything about this album is absolutely crushing. Death, Symbolic. This was one of the first death metal albums that I listened to all the way from front to back. I first became exposed to this album through YouTube's recommended section. I heard the song Crystal Mountain and was instantly blown away, and I had to hear the whole album. This just set me diving headfirst into all of Death's discography and greatly expanded my understanding of death metal and its potential. Immolation, Dawn of Possession. This is an album that is just so personal to me. A little fact about myself, I grew up in a cultist environment. My family is a bunch of Southern Baptists. They're absolute religious psychopaths. That was something that I struggled with in my early years. Being in this family where I didn't belong, I would have to be dragged into church, every Sunday, being surrounded by all these people that just made me so uncomfortable. These weirdos with their seances and their weird rituals and just the kooky stuff that they would say. This album really helped me break out of, the fear that I had of religion. On the self-titled track, when they just say, heaven defied, Christ denied, evil desire, burn in fire. Man, I just felt the power in those words, and I'd never felt stronger in my disbelief, and I never felt like I would be able to make it in this world full of religious dogma, religious stupidity. This album, I feel like it really lent to me strengthening myself. Suffocation, Effigy of the Forgotten. One of my first brutal death metal albums, and an album that really pushed me on guitar. The riffs and solos were absolutely weird, way weirder than anything I'd ever heard before. And it just made me want to become a better player. The album art really just drew me in. It reminded me of Kabuto from Pokemon, so that was a big draw for me initially, and then sonically I was just blown away, and I've been hooked on Suffocation ever since. Children of Bodom, Hate Crew Death Roll. Okay, this was my introduction to metal as a whole. I heard this album, bits and pieces of it, at my friend's house, and I said, wow, this is really good. I didn't know music could sound like this. Keep in mind, I wasn't into music at all before I heard this album, so it never crossed my mind to go and look up the album or download the album or buy the album or anything like that. It was just, oh, wow, that sounded really cool. I didn't know music could sound cool. This was my first album that I actually ran out and bought with my own money, and it was also the first album that I ever got taken away from me by my parents and had thrown away. And that catalyzed the monstrosity that you see today. I am so fucking enthralled with extreme metal, and it all started with Children of Bodom. Carcass, Necroticism, Descanting the Insalubrious. This was an album that really pushed me out of my comfort zone, but not in a way that made me uncomfortable, if that makes any kind of sense. It just sounded so different. I hadn't heard any metal that didn't have a sort of thrash metal bass to it until I heard this album. I'd never heard such disgusting riffs. The vocalizations, similarly so. It was just all around weird at a time when I was listening to things like Children of Bodom, Metallica, Slipknot. When I heard Carcass, man, it was another example of the potential of the genre to create just weird sounds that really brought something to the table that I had never seen before. Cattle Decapitation, The Harvest Floor. I would be remiss to mention Carcass only to leave out Cattle Decapitation. The Harvest Floor was the first Cattle Decapitation album that I experienced on first impact, and it started a tradition of being extremely impressed with every album. I'd listened to Cattle Decap a good bit, as they're a good friend of mine's favorite death metal band, but while I thought all of their stuff I'd heard was really good, decent at the very worst, The Harvest Floor was the first album from them to really knock my socks off. While Cattle Decapitation had been adding plenty of death metal to their originally grind sound, The Harvest Floor is where they mastered the mixture and achieved a perfect Carcass-esque balance of grindcore and death metal. Dying Fetus, Reign Supreme. I had been listening to Dying Fetus for a while, but Reign Supreme really upped the ante for these guys. Dying Fetus is an extremely consistent band for me, but man, Reign Supreme just shattered every bit of Virgin effect I had for this band. Destroy the Opposition used to be just my go-to, but Reign Supreme's riffs, heaviness, grooviness, everything about this album is just extremely catchy, and it grips me completely. Vital Remains, Dechristianize. Lyrical content that really is in line with stuff that I look for. I love the anti-Christian shtick, and Dave Suzuki's leads on this album melt my face off. All the solos, all the riffs, every sweep. There is not a wasted moment on this album. Morbid Angel, Altars of Madness. My first Morbid Angel record, and holy shit did I love it. There's so much catchiness, and the solos sounded basically like Slayer if Slayer was good. I have an appreciation for Slayer today, but at the time when I was first getting into metal, Slayer just didn't really jive with me. I thought the solos just sounded kind of sloppy and lame. It sounded like I was listening to Eddie Van Halen or something, and I really don't like rock music. But Morbid Angel took a very similar style of guitar playing and just upped the technicality, upped the speed, and it just works. Necrophagist, Epitaph. Now, I'm a guitar player. I suck, but I have a real appreciation for the technical limits of this instrument. When I see somebody like Mohammed Swickmez just absolutely obliterate any sort of semblance of skill ceiling I thought existed, man, it's just so inspiring. I could listen to Epitaph front to back at any moment and just be absolutely gripped and blown away every single time by how incredible those guitars are. Thanks for watching. If you guys think my list sucks and it's just complete trash, too bad, so sad. My list, these are my favorites, and you're not really going to be able to convince me otherwise. But tell me what your favorites are. I am legit curious. Thanks again for watching.